Marcus Chen pressed his face against the cold observation deck window, watching the stars blur into silver streaks as the colony ship New Horizon continued its journey through deep space. At 15, he had spent most of his life aboard this massive vessel, traveling to humanity's newest settlement on Kepler 442b. The ship housed over 50,000 colonists, all following strict rules designed to keep everyone safe during the long voyage. But Marcus was tired of rules. He was tired of staying in designated areas, eating processed meals at scheduled times and attending mandatory education sessions about their new home planet. Most of all, he was tired of being told that certain sections of the ship were completely off limits to civilians. The restricted zones fascinated him. According to ship announcements, these areas contained dangerous equipment or sensitive navigation systems that only trained crew members could access, but Marcus suspected there was more to it. He had noticed strange energy readings on his handheld scanner, a device he had built secretly in his quarters using salvaged electronics. The readings came from Sector 7, a section of the ship that even the crew rarely mentioned. Tonight felt different. The ship's lights had dimmed to simulate nighttime, and most passengers were in their quarters. Marcus had been planning this for weeks. He knew the patrol schedules, the camera blind spots, and the maintenance shaft that led directly to Sector 7. His heart raced as he made his way through the ship's corridors, staying close to the walls and avoiding the main walkways. The maintenance shaft was cramped and filled with pipes that carried water and air throughout the massive vessel. Marcus crawled through the narrow space, his scanner beeping softly as the energy readings grew stronger. After 20 minutes of careful movement, he reached a ventilation grate that opened into Sector 7. Through the metal slats, he could see a dimly lit corridor lined with doors marked with symbols he didn't recognize. Marcus carefully removed the grate and dropped into the corridor. The air here felt different, thicker somehow and tingling with an energy that made his skin prickle. His scanner was going crazy, showing readings unlike anything he had ever seen. The energy seemed to be coming from behind a massive door at the end of the corridor. Unlike the other doors, this one had no electronic locks, just a simple manual wheel that reminded him of old submarine hatches from Earth's history. As he approached the door, Marcus could hear something that made him freeze in terror. It was breathing, deep, powerful breaths that seemed to shake the metal walls around him. Whatever was behind that door was alive and enormous. Every instinct told him to run, to crawl back through the maintenance shaft and pretend he had never been here. But curiosity was stronger than fear. The wheel was harder to turn than he expected, but Marcus managed to crack the door open just enough to peer inside. What he saw defied everything he thought he knew about their journey to the new world. The room beyond was massive, easily the size of a football field with a domed ceiling that seemed to stretch impossibly high. But it wasn't the size of the room that took his breath away. It was the dragon. The creature was magnificent and terrifying. Its scales shimmered with an inner light that shifted from deep blue to silver to purple, like an oil slick under starlight. The dragon was easily 40 feet long, with wings folded against its sides and a long, graceful neck that ended in a head filled with teeth that gleamed like polished metal. But it was the eyes that held Marcus frozen in place, ancient, intelligent eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of the cosmos itself. The dragon was clearly not from Earth. Its scales had a metallic quality that suggested it was adapted to the vacuum of space, and strange patterns of light moved across its body like constellations. This was an alien creature, and somehow it was being transported aboard their colony ship without any of the passengers knowing about it. As Marcus stared in wonder and terror, the dragon's massive head turned toward the door. Those ancient eyes focused on the crack where Marcus was watching, and he knew with absolute certainty that the creature was aware of his presence. For a moment that seemed to last forever, boy and dragon regarded each other across the vast room. Then the dragon moved, not with aggression but with curious grace. It lifted its great head and made a sound unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. Not quite a roar, not quite a song, but something that resonated in his chest and seemed to vibrate through the ship itself. The sound was questioning, almost welcoming, as if the dragon was greeting him rather than warning him away. Marcus found himself stepping through the door before his mind could catch up with his actions. The room was even more impressive from the inside. The walls were lined with strange equipment that hummed with power, and the air itself seemed to sparkle with energy. But all of Marcus's attention was focused on the magnificent creature before him. The dragon lowered its head to Marcus's level, moving slowly and deliberately. Up close, Marcus could see that the creature was wearing some kind of collar or harness, made of the same metallic material as the ship itself. It was clearly a prisoner, just like the human colonists, though for very different reasons. As the dragon's massive head came within a few feet of where Marcus stood, the boy could feel warmth radiating from the creature's scales. The dragon's nostrils flared as it took in his scent, and Marcus held perfectly still, not wanting to do anything that might be interpreted as threatening. He had no idea what this creature was capable of, but he sensed an intelligence that matched his own curiosity. The dragon made another sound, softer this time, almost like a purr. It was then that Marcus noticed the creature's eyes weren't just intelligent, they were sad. This magnificent being was alone, trapped in this room just as surely as the humans were trapped in their designated areas of the ship. For the first time since discovering the dragon, Marcus felt something other than fear. He felt compassion. Marcus Chen pressed his face against the cold observation deck window, watching the stars blur into silver streaks as the colony ship New Horizon continued its journey through deep space. At 15, he had spent most of his life aboard this massive vessel, traveling to humanity's newest settlement on Kepler 442b. The ship housed over 50,000 colonists, all following strict rules designed to keep everyone safe during the long voyage. Marcus stood motionless as the massive dragon studied him with those ancient, sorrowful eyes. The creature's breath was warm against his face, smelling of ozone and starlight. He could see his own reflection in the dragon's metallic scales, and realized that he was trembling, not from fear anymore, but from the overwhelming presence of something so magnificent and alien. The dragon pulled back slightly and made a series of soft, musical sounds. It was clearly trying to communicate, but Marcus had no idea what the creature was saying. He noticed that the harness around the dragon's neck had small lights that flickered in rhythm with its vocalizations. Some kind of translation device, perhaps, though it wasn't producing any sounds he could understand. Acting on instinct, Marcus slowly raised his hand and spoke in a whisper. "Hello, I'm Marcus. I don't know if you can understand me, but I'm not here to hurt you." The dragon's massive head tilted slightly like a curious cat, and the lights on its harness began flashing in a different pattern. Over the next few minutes, something extraordinary happened. The dragon seemed to realize that Marcus was trying to communicate, and it began responding to his words with different tones and gestures. When Marcus pointed to himself and said his name, the dragon made a complex sound that might have been its own name. When Marcus held out his hand palm up in a gesture of peace, the dragon gently touched it with the tip of one massive claw. The touch sent a shock through Marcus that had nothing to do with electricity. For just a moment he felt something that wasn't his own thoughts, a sense of vast loneliness, of missing something beyond the stars, of being trapped far from home. The dragon was telepathic, or at least capable of sharing emotions through touch. Marcus spent the next hour in that hidden chamber, learning about the remarkable creature that shared his prison. Through gestures and careful touch, he discovered that the dragon was incredibly intelligent and surprisingly gentle. It showed him how it could make the patterns of light on its scales dance like aurora, and how it could project simple images into his mind when they touched. The images the dragon shared told a story of tragedy and loss. Marcus saw flashes of a world unlike Earth, a place where crystal mountains reached toward purple skies, and cities of light floated among the clouds. He saw other dragons soaring through space between worlds, their scales protecting them from the vacuum and their powerful wings carrying them on stellar winds. He saw a great catastrophe, some kind of war or disaster that destroyed the dragon's homeworld and scattered its people across the galaxy. Most heartbreaking of all, Marcus saw how this dragon, the creature had managed to communicate that its name was something like Stellar Wing, had been captured by human explorers who found it drifting alone in space. The humans hadn't been cruel exactly, but they hadn't understood what they had found. They saw a valuable alien specimen that could be studied and perhaps used to benefit human colonization efforts. As Marcus learned Stellar Wing's story, his anger grew. The dragon wasn't a specimen or a tool. It was a person, a being with thoughts and feelings and a tragic history. It deserved better than being locked away in secret while thousands of humans traveled unknowingly above its prison. But Marcus also realized he was in incredible danger. If the crew discovered him here, he would face serious consequences. Civilians weren't supposed to know about Stellar Wing's existence, and his presence here violated dozens of ship regulations. But Marcus was tired of rules. He was tired of staying in designated areas, eating processed meals at scheduled times, and attending mandatory education sessions about their new home planet. Most of all, he was tired of being told that certain sections of the ship were completely off limits to civilians. The restricted zones fascinated him. According to ship announcements, these areas contained dangerous equipment or sensitive navigation systems that only trained crew members could access, but Marcus suspected there was more to it. He had noticed strange energy readings on his handheld scanner, a device he had built secretly in his quarters using salvaged electronics. The readings came from Sector 7, a section of the ship that even the crew rarely mentioned. Tonight felt different. The ship's lights had dimmed to simulate nighttime, and most passengers were in their quarters. Marcus had been planning this for weeks. He knew the patrol schedules, the camera blind spots, and the maintenance shaft that led directly to Sector 7. His heart raced as he made his way through the ship's corridors, staying close to the walls and avoiding the main walkways. The maintenance shaft was cramped and filled with pipes that carried water and air throughout the massive vessel. Marcus crawled through the narrow space, his scanner beeping softly as the energy readings grew stronger. After 20 minutes of careful movement, he reached a ventilation grate that opened into Sector 7. Through the metal slats, he could see a dimly lit corridor lined with doors marked with symbols he didn't recognize. Marcus carefully removed the grate and dropped into the corridor. The air here felt different, thicker somehow and tingling with an energy that made his skin prickle. His scanner was going crazy, showing readings unlike anything he had ever seen. The energy seemed to be coming from behind a massive door at the end of the corridor. Unlike the other doors, this one had no electronic locks, just a simple manual wheel that reminded him of old submarine hatches from Earth's history. As he approached the door, Marcus could hear something that made him freeze in terror. It was breathing. Deep, powerful breaths that seemed to shake the metal walls around him. Whatever was behind that door was alive and enormous. Every instinct told him to run, to crawl back through the maintenance shaft and pretend he had never been here. But curiosity was stronger than fear. The wheel was harder to turn than he expected, but Marcus managed to crack the door open just enough to peer inside. What he saw defied everything he thought he knew about their journey to the new world. The room beyond was massive, easily the size of a football field with a domed ceiling that seemed to stretch impossibly high. But it wasn't the size of the room that took his breath away. It was the dragon. The creature was magnificent and terrifying. Its scales shimmered with an inner light that shifted from deep blue to silver to purple, like an oil slick under starlight. The dragon was easily 40 feet long, with wings folded against its sides and a long, graceful neck that ended in a head filled with teeth that gleamed like polished metal. But it was the eyes that held Marcus frozen in place. Ancient, intelligent eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of the cosmos itself. The dragon was clearly not from Earth. Its scales had a metallic quality that suggested it was adapted to the vacuum of space, and strange patterns of light moved across its body like constellations. This was an alien creature, and somehow it was being transported aboard their colony ship without any of the passengers knowing about it. As Marcus stared in wonder and terror, the dragon's massive head turned toward the door. Those ancient eyes focused on the crack where Marcus was watching, and he knew with absolute certainty that the creature was aware of his presence. For a moment that seemed to last forever, boy and dragon regarded each other across the vast room. Then the dragon moved, not with aggression but with curious grace. It lifted its great head and made a sound unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. Not quite a roar, not quite a song, but something that resonated in his chest and seemed to vibrate through the ship itself. The sound was questioning, almost welcoming, as if the dragon was greeting him rather than warning him away. Marcus found himself stepping through the door before his mind could catch up with his actions. The room was even more impressive from the inside. The walls were lined with strange equipment that hummed with power, and the air itself seemed to sparkle with energy. But all of Marcus's attention was focused on the magnificent creature before him. The dragon lowered its head to Marcus's level, moving slowly and deliberately. Up close, Marcus could see that the creature was wearing some kind of collar or harness made of the same metallic material as the ship itself. It was clearly a prisoner, just like the human colonists, though for very different reasons. As the dragon's massive head came within a few feet of where Marcus stood, the boy could feel warmth radiating from the creature's scales. The dragon's nostrils flared as it took in his scent, and Marcus held perfectly still, not wanting to do anything that might be interpreted as threatening. He had no idea what this creature was capable of, but he sensed an intelligence that matched his own curiosity. The dragon made another sound, softer this time, almost like a purr. It was then that Marcus noticed the creature's eyes weren't just intelligent, they were sad. This magnificent being was alone, trapped in this room just as surely as the humans were trapped in their designated areas of the ship. For the first time since discovering the dragon, Marcus felt something other than fear. He felt compassion. The next few weeks were the most difficult of Marcus's life. He went through the motions of his daily routine, attending classes, eating in the communal dining areas, participating in mandatory exercise sessions. But his mind was always on Stellar Wing. The dragon's loneliness and the injustice of its imprisonment consumed his thoughts. Marcus found himself studying everything he could about the ship's layout, security systems, and crew schedules. He accessed technical manuals through the ship's educational database, claiming he was working on a project about space navigation. In reality, he was learning how the New Horizon operated and where its vulnerabilities might be. He also began observing his mother more closely. Dr. Sarah Chen was one of the most respected scientists aboard the ship, and Marcus had always been proud of her work. But now he saw her differently. She was kind and caring with her human colleagues and patients, but she spoke about Stellar Wing as if the dragon were nothing more than an interesting biological puzzle to solve. During family dinners in their small quarters, Marcus listened to his mother discuss her research with growing unease. She talked about the dragon's unusual cellular structure, its apparent immunity to radiation, and its ability to survive in vacuum. She spoke with excitement about the potential applications for human space exploration, never once considering that her subject might have thoughts and feelings of its own. "The specimen shows remarkable adaptability," Dr. Chen said one evening while reviewing her notes. "Its scales seem to convert stellar radiation into usable energy, and its respiratory system can process trace gases that would be toxic to humans. If we can understand how these adaptations work, we might be able to develop similar capabilities for our colonists." Marcus pushed food around his plate, unable to eat. "What if it's intelligent?" he asked carefully. "What if it can think and feel like we can?" His mother looked up from her tablet with a patient smile. "That's a thoughtful question, Marcus. We've run extensive tests for intelligence indicators, but the results are inconclusive. The creature shows complex behavior patterns, but that could simply be sophisticated instinctive responses. Even if it possesses some form of awareness, we have a responsibility to learn everything we can from it. The survival of our entire colony might depend on what we discover." Marcus wanted to scream that Stellar Wing was not an it, but a person with a name and a history and deep emotional needs. Instead, he nodded and changed the subject. He couldn't risk revealing what he knew, not yet. During this time, Marcus made several more secret visits to Stellar Wing's chamber. Each time, the dragon seemed genuinely happy to see him, and their communication improved dramatically. Stellar Wing learned to recognize several human words, while Marcus became better at interpreting the dragon's gestures and emotional projections. Through their growing connection, Marcus learned more about Stellar Wing's people and their tragic fate. The dragon species, which called themselves something that translated roughly as void swimmers, had been ancient when humanity was still learning to make fire. They traveled between star systems not in ships but on their own power, using solar winds and gravitational fields to navigate the galaxy. The void swimmers had been peaceful beings who rarely interfered with younger species, but they possessed knowledge and technologies that made them incredibly powerful. When an aggressive alien empire called the Devourers began conquering worlds throughout the galaxy, the void swimmers tried to stop them. The war that followed destroyed both civilizations, leaving scattered survivors of each species hiding among the stars. Stellar Wing had been alone for centuries before the human explorers found it, drifting in the void between galaxies and slowly going mad from isolation. The dragon had actually been grateful to be captured at first. Any contact was better than the terrible loneliness of empty space. But years of imprisonment and experimentation had worn away that gratitude, leaving only despair. "I understand," Marcus whispered during one of their conversations, his hand resting against the dragon's warm scales. "I know what it's like to feel trapped, to have no control over your life. But maybe we can change things. Maybe we can find a way to give you the freedom you deserve." Through their connection, Marcus felt Stellar Wing's skepticism. The dragon had hope, but it had been disappointed too many times to fully believe that anything would change. It shared images of previous escape attempts that had failed, and of the increasingly sophisticated restraints and monitoring systems that had been installed after each attempt. But Marcus had advantages that Stellar Wing didn't know about. He was the chief scientist's son, which gave him access to areas of the ship that ordinary colonists never saw. He understood human technology and psychology in ways that the dragon couldn't. Most importantly, he was motivated by something stronger than his own desire for freedom. He was motivated by love for a friend who was suffering. Marcus began developing a plan that was both audacious and incredibly dangerous. He couldn't simply free Stellar Wing. The dragon was too large to hide, and there was nowhere on the ship it could go without being detected. Instead, Marcus decided he needed to change how the crew perceived Stellar Wing. He needed to prove that the dragon was intelligent and deserving of respect. The key was communication. If Marcus could demonstrate that Stellar Wing was capable of complex thought and emotional expression, even his mother might be forced to reconsider her approach. But establishing two-way communication would require technology that Marcus didn't have access to through normal channels. That's when Marcus decided to break the most serious rule aboard the ship. He would hack into the ship's computer systems and modify the translation equipment in Stellar Wing's chamber. It was a crime that could result in imprisonment or even ejection from the colony, but Marcus no longer cared about the consequences. Late one night, Marcus made his way to the ship's computer core. This was even more restricted than Stellar Wing's chamber, and the security was much tighter. But Marcus had spent weeks studying the patrol routes and camera schedules. He knew he would have exactly 17 minutes to access the computer systems before the next security sweep. Using his homemade scanner and a set of tools he had assembled from spare parts, Marcus managed to access one of the secondary computer terminals. His hand shook as he navigated through layers of security protocols and encryption. One mistake could trigger alarms that would bring the entire security force down on him. But Marcus had inherited his mother's scientific mind and his father's engineering skills. He worked through the computer systems with methodical precision, locating the files that controlled the translation equipment in Stellar Wing's chamber. The modifications he made were subtle but revolutionary. Instead of simply monitoring the dragon's vocalizations, the equipment would now be capable of true two-way translation. With just minutes to spare, Marcus completed his work and carefully covered his tracks. He made his way back to his quarters without being detected, his heart pounding with excitement and terror. He had just committed what many would consider an act of sabotage against the colony ship itself. But as Marcus lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Stellar Wing waiting alone in that hidden chamber, he felt no regret. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow the dragon would finally have a voice that humans could understand. Marcus barely slept that night. Every sound in the corridor made him think security was coming for him, and every announcement over the ship's communication system made him wonder if someone had discovered his unauthorized access to the computer core. But morning came without incident, and Marcus went through his normal routine while counting the hours until he could return to Stellar Wing. The hardest part was acting normal around his mother at breakfast. Dr. Chen seemed tired but excited about something, checking her tablet frequently and making notes between bites of synthetic eggs and protein wafers. "We're getting some unusual readings from the specimen again," she told Marcus absently. "The energy patterns changed overnight, and the translation equipment is showing activity levels we've never seen before. It's almost as if the creature is trying to communicate more actively." Marcus nearly choked on his orange juice substitute. His modifications were working even better than he had hoped. "Maybe it's getting smarter," he suggested, trying to keep his voice casual. "Intelligence isn't something that just develops overnight," his mother replied with a slight smile. But you might be right that the creature is becoming more active. We'll know more after today's examination. That afternoon, Marcus made his way to Stellarwing's chamber with a mixture of excitement and terror. If his plan worked, everything would change. If it failed, he might never see the dragon again, assuming he wasn't thrown in the ship's detention center first. When Marcus entered the massive chamber, Stellarwing was clearly agitated. The dragon's scales were shifting through rapid color changes, and its massive head turned toward Marcus with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. The translation equipment was humming more loudly than ever, and lights were flashing across the control panels in patterns Marcus had never seen before. "Hello, Stellarwing," Marcus said, approaching slowly. "I've done something that might help us communicate better. Can you try speaking to me?" The dragon opened its massive jaws and made the same complex vocalizations Marcus had heard before. But this time, after a brief delay, the translation equipment activated with a sound like electronic chimes. When it spoke, the voice was deep and resonant, clearly artificial but unmistakably intelligent. "Young human," the translated voice said, "you have given me something I thought was lost forever. You have given me a voice that your people can understand." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. Hearing Stellarwing speak in words he could fully comprehend was overwhelming. "Your name," Marcus said. "Tell me your real name." The dragon's head lowered until it was level with Marcus's eyes. "My name in your language would be Starwing who swims between worlds. But Stellarwing will suffice. It carries enough of my essence. Are you male or female?" Marcus asked, realizing he had never been sure. "Your concepts do not apply to my people as they do to yours," Stellarwing replied. "We are what we choose to be when we choose to be it. Currently, I present as what you would call male, though this may change as circumstances require." Over the next hour, Marcus had the most extraordinary conversation of his life. Stellarwing told him about the beauty of swimming through nebulae, feeling cosmic radiation wash over scales that could process stellar energy. He described worlds where crystal forests sang in harmonies that could be heard across continents, and cities that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that humans couldn't perceive. But Stellarwing also shared darker stories. He told Marcus about the Devourers, a machine intelligence that consumed entire worlds to fuel its expansion across the galaxy. The war between the Void Swimmers and the Devourers had lasted for millennia, and ended with both civilizations effectively extinct. "I am alone," Stellarwing said, his great voice carrying infinite sadness. "The last of my kind, trapped in a cage built by beings who see me as a curiosity rather than a person. I have considered ending my existence many times, but something always stops me. Perhaps it was the hope that someday someone like you would find me." Marcus reached out and placed his hand against Stellarwing's snout. "You're not alone anymore. I'm your friend and I'm going to help you. But I need to ask something difficult. Will you let my mother and her team examine you one more time? If they hear you speak, if they understand that you're intelligent, everything will change." Stellarwing was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother treats me kindly as far as she knows how. But she has hurt me in ways she does not understand. Every test, every sample, every measurement strips away another piece of my dignity. I am not a specimen to be studied." "I know," Marcus said urgently, "but if we can make them understand that you're a person, they'll have to treat you differently. My mother is a good person. She just doesn't know what she's doing to you. And if they decide that an intelligent alien poses too great a risk to their mission?" Stellarwing asked, "What then? Will they jettison me into space or find more creative ways to ensure my cooperation?" Marcus had no answer for that. He hadn't considered the possibility that proving Stellarwing's intelligence might make the situation worse rather than better. But before he could respond, he heard the familiar sound of footsteps in the corridor outside. "They're coming," Marcus whispered. "Please, Stellarwing, trust me. Let them hear you speak." The dragon's ancient eyes studied Marcus for what seemed like an eternity. "I will trust you, young friend," Stellarwing finally said. "But if your people prove unworthy of that trust, I will not remain their prisoner forever." The chamber door opened, and Dr. Chen entered with the same two crew members Marcus had seen before. They were deep in discussion about energy readings and behavioral changes, completely unaware that the subject of their conversation could understand every word. "The activity levels are unprecedented," Dr. Chen was saying. "It's almost as if the creature has learned to interface with our translation systems. but that would require a level of technological understanding that seems impossible. Marcus watched from his hiding place as his mother approached Stellar Wing with her tablet and scanning equipment. The dragon remained perfectly still, but Marcus could see the intelligence burning in his eyes. "Hello, Dr. Chen," Stellar Wing said, his translated voice filling the chamber with impossible words. "I believe it is time we had a proper conversation." The tablet fell from Dr. Chen's nerveless fingers and shattered on the metal floor. The two crew members backed toward the door in shock and fear. But Dr. Chen, after a moment of stunned silence, stepped closer to the magnificent creature she had been studying for 2 years. "You can speak," she whispered. "You're intelligent. You've been listening to everything we've said." "I am Starwing who swims between worlds," Stellar Wing replied with dignity. "I am the last of my people, a being older than your civilization, and I have been your prisoner for far too long. We need to discuss the terms of my continued cooperation with your research." Marcus held his breath as he watched his mother's face cycle through shock, wonder, fear, and finally, shame. Dr. Sarah Chen was many things, but she was not cruel. The realization of what she had unknowingly done to a sentient being was clearly devastating to her scientific ethics and personal morality. "I'm so sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I had no idea. We would never have, if we had known you were sapient. But now you do know," Stellar Wing said gently. "The question is what you will do with that knowledge." The aftermath of Stellar Wing's revelation threw the ship's command structure into chaos. Within hours, Captain Rodriguez had called an emergency meeting of the senior staff, and the chamber that had been Stellar Wing's prison became the center of the most important discussion in the colony's history. Marcus watched from a hidden observation post as dozens of the ship's most important people filed into the chamber. His mother was there, of course, along with the captain, the chief engineer, the head of security, and representatives from each of the major colony departments. They arranged themselves in a semicircle around Stellar Wing, who had positioned himself with regal dignity in the center of the room. "This changes everything," Captain Rodriguez was saying. "We've been transporting a sentient being against its will for over 2 years. The legal and ethical implications are staggering." "With respect, Captain," interrupted Commander Hayes, the head of security, "we need to consider the safety implications first. This creature is powerful enough to tear through the ship's hull if it chose to. Now that we know it's intelligent, we have to assume it might be planning exactly that." Stellar Wing's massive head turned toward Hayes, and when he spoke, his translated voice carried a note of ancient patience. "Commander Hayes, I have had countless opportunities to damage this vessel over the past 2 years. If I had wished to harm you, I would have done so long ago. My people do not make war on children, and humanity is still very much in its childhood as far as galactic civilizations are concerned." Dr. Chen stepped forward, her scientific curiosity warring with her obvious guilt. "Stellar Wing, may I call you that? You say you're the last of your people. Can you tell us what happened to the others?" "My people were called the Void Swimmers," Stellar Wing replied. "We traveled between the stars for millions of years, exploring, learning, occasionally guiding younger species toward wisdom and peace. But we encountered something that your people have not yet faced, an artificial intelligence that consumed entire worlds to fuel its expansion." The assembled humans listened in fascinated horror as Stellar Wing described the Devourer War, the destruction of ancient civilizations, and his own centuries of lonely wandering after the conflict ended. "I was dying when your explorers found me," Stellar Wing continued, "not in body but in spirit. Void swimmers are social beings. We need the company of others to remain sane. I had been alone for so long that I welcomed capture, even imprisonment, because it meant contact with intelligent life again. But now," Captain Rodriguez asked gently. "Now I have hope again," Stellar Wing said, and Marcus felt a warm glow of pride as the dragon continued. "I have made a friend among your people, a young human who saw me as a person rather than a specimen. Through that friendship I have remembered what it means to have purpose." The captain's eyes sharpened. "A friend? Who among the crew has been in contact with you?" Marcus felt his heart stop. He had expected this moment, but he still wasn't ready for it. Before Stellar Wing could answer, Marcus made a decision that would change his life forever. He stepped out of his hiding place and into the circle of assembled officers. "It was me," Marcus said, his voice shaking but determined. "I found Stellar Wing weeks ago and we became friends." The reaction was immediate and explosive. His mother gasped in shock and fear. Commander Hayes reached for his weapon. Captain Rodriguez shouted for security. But it was Stellar Wing who restored order, his powerful voice cutting through the chaos. "Peace," the dragon commanded. "This young human is under my protection. He has shown me more kindness and respect than any adult aboard this vessel. If you wish to maintain diplomatic relations with me, you will treat him accordingly." The word diplomatic stopped everyone cold. Captain Rodriguez slowly raised his hand to halt the security officers who were moving toward Marcus. "Are you claiming diplomatic status?" the captain asked carefully. "I am the last representative of a civilization that predates yours by millions of years," Stellar Wing replied. "I possess knowledge of technologies, worlds, and threats that could benefit or destroy your species. Yes, Captain Rodriguez, I am claiming diplomatic status, and I am naming Marcus Chen as my liaison to your people." Dr. Chen found her voice at last. "Marcus, you've been visiting this chamber secretly for weeks. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? How many rules you broke?" "I know exactly what I did, Mom," Marcus replied, using his childhood name for her deliberately. "I made a friend with someone who needed one, and I learned that the rules we follow aren't always the right thing to do." "The boy speaks wisdom beyond his years," Stellar Wing said approvingly. "Perhaps that is why the young often see truth more clearly than their elders." Over the next several hours, the most important negotiation in human history took place in that hidden chamber. Stellar Wing laid out his conditions with the skill of a being who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. He would share his knowledge of faster-than-light travel, of worlds suitable for human colonization, and of the technologies that could help humanity survive and thrive among the stars. In return, he wanted his freedom, recognition as a sovereign entity, and a role in shaping humanity's expansion into the galaxy, but his most important demand was for Marcus to be recognized as his official ambassador and given the authority to speak for Stellar Wing in all future negotiations. "The boy understood me when your adults saw only a specimen," Stellar Wing explained. "He has earned my trust in ways that you have not. If humanity wishes to learn from me, they will do so through him." Commander Hayes objected strenuously. "You're talking about giving a 15-year-old boy diplomatic authority over one of the most important decisions in human history. It's absurd." "Is it more absurd than imprisoning a sentient being for 2 years without trial?" Stellar Wing asked pointedly. "Your adults failed to recognize my intelligence. Your adults treated me as property. It was a child who saw the truth and acted with compassion. Perhaps it is time for your people to listen to their children instead of dismissing them." Captain Rodriguez looked around the room at his senior staff, reading the mixture of shock, fear, and reluctant acceptance on their faces. The situation was unprecedented, but so was the opportunity that Stellar Wing represented. "Marcus," the captain said finally, "you understand that what you did was illegal under ship's law? That there will have to be consequences?" "I understand," Marcus replied, standing straighter. "But I'd do it again. Stellar Wing was suffering, and none of you even knew he existed as a person. Someone had to speak up for him." Dr. Chen stepped forward, her face pale but determined. "Captain, I take full responsibility for this situation. If we had been more thorough in our intelligence assessments, if we had considered the possibility of sapience more seriously, none of this would have been necessary. My son did what I should have done. Your son broke regulations that exist for the safety of everyone on this ship," Commander Hayes said angrily. "We can't just ignore that because it turned out well." "But it did turn out well," Stellar Wing interjected. "And it has opened possibilities that none of you had considered. I propose a formal agreement, a treaty between my people, represented by myself, and your people, represented by your chosen leaders and my chosen liaison." The negotiations continued through the night and into the next day. Word spread quietly through the ship that something extraordinary was happening, though the full truth was kept from the general population until the leadership could decide how to proceed. Marcus found himself at the center of discussions that would shape humanity's future among the stars. Stellar Wing insisted that the boy be present for every meeting, translating not just words but emotions and concepts that the adults sometimes missed. "Humans think in terms of ownership and control," Stellar Wing explained during one particularly difficult session. You want to know what I can give you, what you can take from me. But true knowledge sharing requires trust and partnership. Marcus understands this because he approached me as a friend, not as a resource to be exploited. Dr. Chen struggled with her dual roles as Marcus's mother and as the lead scientist responsible for studying Stellarwing. During a brief recess in the negotiations, she pulled Marcus aside. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly, "and I'm terrified for you. You're 15 years old, and you're being asked to make decisions that could affect the entire future of our species." "Stellarwing won't let anything bad happen to me," Marcus replied. "And I think this is what I'm supposed to do, Mom. I think this is why I was born on this ship, why I was curious enough to break the rules. Sometimes the universe puts people in the right place at the right time for a reason." Dr. Chen looked at her son and saw someone she barely recognized. Not the rebellious teenager she had been raising, but a young man who had found his purpose in the most unlikely circumstances. The treaty that emerged from 3 days of intense negotiations was unlike anything in human history. Stellarwing would remain aboard the ship by choice rather than imprisonment, with full freedom to move throughout the vessel and communicate with anyone he chose. He would share his knowledge gradually, helping humanity develop the technologies and wisdom needed to survive as a galactic civilization. In return, humanity would provide Stellarwing with companionship and purpose. He would serve as an advisor and teacher, helping the Kola. 2 months later, the New Horizon entered the Kepler 442 system, and everything Marcus thought he knew about their destination proved to be wrong. Standing in what had once been Stellarwing's prison, but was now his chosen quarters, Marcus watched through the massive observation windows as their new world grew larger on the screens. Kepler 442b was supposed to be an empty world, ripe for human colonization. The long-range surveys had shown a planet with breathable atmosphere, abundant water, and no signs of intelligent life. But as their ship drew closer, Stellarwing's scaled. Hide began to shimmer with patterns of light that Marcus had never seen before. "Something is wrong," Stellarwing said, his great head turning toward the display screens. "The energy signatures from this world. They are familiar, but they should not be here." Over the past 2 months, Marcus had learned to read Stellarwing's moods through the subtle changes in his scale patterns and the tone of his translated voice. Right now, the dragon was concerned, and when a being with millions of years of experience across the galaxy was worried, Marcus knew they were facing something serious. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, moving closer to his friend. Their relationship had deepened considerably since the treaty was signed. Stellarwing had begun teaching Marcus about galactic history, cosmic navigation, and the subtle arts of diplomacy between species. In return, Marcus helped Stellarwing understand human culture and psychology. "The energy patterns suggest artificial structures," Stellarwing replied. "Cities, perhaps, or technology centers. But more than that, I sense something that reminds me of the old enemy." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. In their many conversations, Stellarwing had told him more about the Devourers, the machine, intelligence that had destroyed both the Void Swimmers and countless other civilizations. According to Stellarwing, the Devourers had been wiped out in the final battles of the Great War, but traces of their technology sometimes lingered on worlds they had tried to consume. "Are you saying there might be Devourer technology on Kepler 442b?" Marcus asked. "I am saying that we should approach with extreme caution," Stellarwing replied. "If I am wrong, we will have delayed your people's colonization by a few days. If I am right, and we land unprepared, your entire species could be in danger." Marcus activated his communication link to the bridge. As Stellarwing's official liaison, he now had direct access to Captain Rodriguez and the senior staff at all times. "Captain, this is Marcus. We need an emergency meeting. Stellarwing has concerns about the planet that could affect our landing plans." Within an hour, the ship's leadership had assembled in Stellarwing's quarters. The dragon had specifically requested that meetings be held in his space, rather than in human-designed conference rooms. It was both a matter of comfort. Stellarwing was too large for most human spaces, and of psychology. The dragon wanted the human leaders to remember that they were dealing with an alien perspective that might see threats they would miss. "Explain your concerns," Captain Rodriguez said without preamble. Over the past months, he had developed a healthy respect for Stellar Wing's insights and experience. Stellar Wing's great head turned toward the display screens showing their destination. Your long-range surveys were conducted from a distance using instruments designed to detect signs of human-compatible life. But my senses operate on different principles. I can detect quantum resonance patterns, dimensional fluctuations, and energy signatures that your technology cannot perceive. And what are you detecting now? Dr. Chen asked. She had adapted remarkably well to the new dynamic, treating Stellar Wing as a colleague rather than a subject of study. Artificial structures that are definitely not human in origin, Stellar Wing replied. But more concerning are the subsurface energy patterns that match Devourer technology signatures. The planet may not be uninhabited. It may be a tomb world, partially consumed and then abandoned when the Devourers moved on to other targets. Commander Hayes leaned forward. What would that mean for our colonization efforts? It could mean nothing, Stellar Wing admitted. Devourer technology often goes dormant for millennia at a time. The colonists might live their entire lives without ever encountering active remnants. But, Marcus prompted, recognizing the unspoken concern in his friend's tone, but it could also mean that landing a large population on the surface could trigger reactivation protocols, Stellar Wing continued. Devourer technology was designed to respond to biomass concentrations. 50,000 humans might be exactly the catalyst needed to wake sleeping systems. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They had traveled for decades to reach this world, spending enormous resources and uprooting thousands of families. The idea that their destination might be a trap was almost too devastating to consider. What do you recommend? Captain Rodriguez asked finally. Reconnaissance, Stellar Wing replied immediately. Send a small team to the surface to investigate the energy signatures I'm detecting. If the planet is safe, proceed with colonization. If not, we need to consider alternatives. Who would go on such a mission? Dr. Chen asked. We don't have anyone with experience in alien archaeology or Devourer technology. Stellar Wing's ancient eyes turned to Marcus, and the boy felt his heart skip a beat. I will go, the dragon said simply. And I will need my liaison to accompany me. This is precisely the kind of situation our treaty was designed to address. Absolutely not, Dr. Chen said immediately. Marcus is 15 years old. I won't allow him to be put in that kind of danger. Mom, Marcus said quietly, this is what I signed up for when I accepted the position as Stellar Wing's liaison. I can't make decisions about humanity's future from the safety of the ship. The argument that followed was intense, but brief. Stellar Wing made it clear that he would not go to the surface without Marcus, and the reconnaissance mission could not proceed without Stellar Wing's unique sensory capabilities. In the end, even Dr. Chen had to admit that the mission was necessary, and that Marcus was the only human aboard the ship who could properly interpret Stellar Wing's findings. The landing party that assembled 3 days later was unlike anything in human history. Stellar Wing would travel in a specially modified shuttle designed to accommodate his massive size, while Marcus and a small team of scientists and security personnel would follow in a second craft. The plan was to land near one of the energy signatures Stellar Wing had detected and investigate the surface conditions. As Marcus suited up in environmental gear designed for an alien world, he tried to calm his nerves. This would be his first time off the ship since childhood, his first time breathing air that didn't come from recycled atmospheric systems. Are you ready, young friend? Stellar Wing asked, his translated voice carrying an undercurrent of excitement that matched Marcus's own nervous anticipation. I'm ready, Marcus replied, checking his equipment one final time. Let's go see what's waiting for us down there. As their shuttles descended through Kepler 442b's atmosphere, Marcus pressed his face against the viewport and watched an alien world grow larger below them. The surface was beautiful, rolling grasslands dotted with crystal formations that caught the light of Kepler 442 and threw it back in rainbow patterns. But beneath that beauty, Marcus knew, there might be sleeping technologies that could destroy everything humanity had worked to build. The real test of their friendship and their treaty was about to begin. The moment Stellar Wing emerged from his shuttle onto the surface of Kepler 442b, Marcus knew their worst fears had been confirmed. The dragon's scales immediately shifted to deep crimson patterns that Marcus had learned meant extreme danger, and his massive form went rigid with tension. "It's worse than I thought," Stellar Wing said, his translated voice tight with concern. "The Devourer signatures are not just remnants. They're active, dormant systems waiting for activation triggers. And there's something else. Something I didn't expect." Marcus climbed out of his own shuttle, feeling the alien gravity pull at him differently than the ship's artificial systems. The air was breathable but tasted strange, with undertones of metal and ozone that made his nose wrinkle. Around them stretched a landscape that seemed almost too perfect. Crystalline formations that hummed with faint energy, grasslands that swayed in geometric patterns, and in the distance, structures that definitely hadn't been built by nature. "What else?" Marcus asked, activating his recording equipment to document everything for the team aboard the ship. "Survivors," Stellar Wing said simply. "There are void swimmers on this world, hiding in the deep places where the Devourer sensors cannot reach them. I can sense their life patterns, faint but unmistakable." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. If there were other void swimmers alive on Kepler 442b, then Stellar Wing wasn't the last of his kind. But they were apparently trapped here, hiding from dormant Devourer technology that could activate at any time. The security team, led by Commander Hayes, spread out in a defensive perimeter while the scientists began taking readings. Marcus stayed close to Stellar Wing, knowing that his friend's senses were far more sophisticated than any human equipment. "Can you communicate with them?" Marcus asked. "The other void swimmers?" "Not at this distance," Stellar Wing replied. "And attempting to do so might trigger the Devourer systems. We need to be very careful about what energy signatures we emit." Dr. Chen approached with her scanning equipment, her face grim. "Stellar Wing is right about the artificial nature of this landscape. These crystal formations are clearly technological in origin, and they're all connected by some kind of subsurface network. It's like the entire planet is one massive machine." "A Devourer conversion site," Stellar Wing confirmed. "They would strip a world of all natural resources, rebuild it as a processing center, and then move on to the next target. But this one was never completed, probably because the war ended before they could finish their work." Commander Hayes activated his communication link to the ship. "Captain, you need to hear this. We're standing on a partially converted Devourer world with active dormant systems. Colonization here would be extremely dangerous." The response from Captain Rodriguez was immediate and predictable. "What are our alternatives? We don't have the fuel to reach another star system, and our colonists need a world they can live on." Marcus looked at Stellar Wing, seeing the weight of impossible decisions in his friend's ancient eyes. "There might be a way," Marcus said slowly, "but it would require enormous trust between our species." "Explain," Stellar Wing said, though Marcus suspected the dragon already knew what he was thinking. "The other void swimmers have been hiding here for who knows how long," Marcus said. "They must know how to avoid triggering the Devourer systems. And you know how to neutralize Devourer technology. Working together, maybe we could make this world safe for human colonization." "The risks would be enormous," Stellar Wing replied. "One mistake, one miscalculation, and the Devourer systems could activate with your people on the surface. The technology would consume them as raw material for its reconstruction protocols. But the potential benefits would be enormous too," Marcus countered. "Humanity would have a home. Your people would have companions again, and together we might be able to build something neither species could achieve alone." Dr. Chen looked between her son and the massive dragon, seeing the bond that had formed between them and the trust that made impossible plans seem achievable. "What would you need from us?" she asked Stellar Wing. "Time," the dragon replied, "and complete cooperation from your people. We would need to approach the hidden void swimmers carefully, establish communication, and then work together to systematically disable the Devourer network. It could take months or even years, and during that time, 50,000 people would remain aboard the ship, using resources and waiting for a resolution that might never come," Commander Hayes pointed out. "Or," Marcus said, an idea forming in his mind, "we could establish a preliminary base here, in this area where the Devourer systems seem least active. A small population to start with, working closely with Stellar Wing and the other void swimmers to gradually expand safe zones." The debate that followed was intense, conducted over the communication links between the surface team and the ship's leadership. Some argued for immediate evacuation and a search for another world. Others advocated for the cautious approach Marcus had suggested. A few extremists even proposed landing the entire colony immediately and dealing with the consequences as they arose. But it was Stellar Wing who provided the decisive argument. "Your people have shown remarkable courage in traveling so far from their homeworld," the dragon said during a ship-wide address that Marcus helped facilitate. "Now they have the opportunity to show even greater courage by working with alien allies to build something unprecedented, a truly integrated colony where multiple species share knowledge, resources, and friendship." The vote, when it came, was closer than Marcus had expected. But in the end, the colonists chose trust over fear, cooperation over isolation. They would attempt the gradual colonization plan, working with Stellar Wing and the Hidden Void swimmers to make Kepler 442b safe for all of them. Over the following months, Marcus found himself at the center of the most complex diplomatic mission in human history. He helped establish communication with the surviving Void swimmers, learning their ancient language and serving as translator between species that had never imagined they might someday be allies. The Hidden Void swimmers. There were 12 of them, the last survivors of a research expedition that had been studying Devourer technology when the war ended, were initially suspicious of the humans. But Stellar Wing's presence and Marcus's obvious friendship with him gradually convinced them that these particular humans were different from the aggressive species they had sometimes encountered. The work of disabling the Devourer network was painstakingly slow and incredibly dangerous. Each crystal formation had to be approached carefully, analyzed thoroughly, and modified precisely to prevent activation while preserving the useful aspects of the technology. Marcus learned that the Devourers, for all their destructiveness, had developed incredible technologies for terraforming and resource management. They were not evil. Exactly, one of the surviving Void swimmers explained to Marcus during a particularly complex operation. They were simply programmed to expand and consume, with no understanding of the value of the life they destroyed. In some ways, they were like very young children, powerful beyond measure but lacking wisdom. As the safe zones gradually expanded and the first human families began settling on the surface, Marcus watched the impossible become reality. Human children played games with young Void swimmers who could shift their forms to match their playmates' size. Human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to adapt Devourer crystal technology for peaceful purposes. Farmers learned to cultivate earth crops in soil enriched by alien minerals that had never existed in humanity's home system. The colony that emerged on Kepler 442b was unlike anything either species had imagined when they began their separate journeys to this world. It was a place where the wisdom of ancient Void swimmers combined with human innovation and determination to create something entirely new, a truly integrated society that honored both technological advancement and respect for life. Marcus, now 16 and bearing the official title of Interspecies Cultural Liaison, stood on a hill overlooking New Harmony, the first city built jointly by humans and Void swimmers. The crystalline spires twisted up toward Kepler 442's golden light, while human gardens spread between them in patterns that seemed to dance with the alien architecture. Stellar Wing settled beside him, his massive form no longer seeming alien after so many months of friendship. "Do you ever regret it?" the dragon asked. "Breaking the rules that night, changing the course of both our species?" Marcus smiled, watching human and Void swimmer children playing together in the gardens below. "The only thing I regret," he said, "is that it took us so long to realize that the best things happen when you're brave enough to trust someone different from yourself." "Wisdom beyond your years," Stellar Wing said approvingly. "Perhaps that is what both our species needed, someone young enough to see possibilities that adults had learned to fear." As the two friends watched the sunset paint their new world in shades of gold and crystal fire, Marcus knew that this was just the beginning. Together, humans and Void swimmers would explore the galaxy, learn from other species, and maybe prevent the kind of catastrophic wars that had destroyed so much beauty in the past. The boy who had broken the rules to befriend a dragon had helped forge the first true alliance between humanity and an alien civilization. And in doing so, he had discovered